Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer, and my pronouns are she, they. I'm your sexual health lead for Pulse this year, and today we're going to be discussing sex and sexuality. So, let's start off with what sexuality even is. Sexuality refers to the way that people experience and express sexual feelings. Sexual attraction is a part of human sexuality, but sexuality is distinct and separate from sex and gender. So, gender, like I said, is different from sex and sexuality. Gender is how someone personally identifies and expresses themselves in respects to their culture's constructs of what it means to be a man, a woman, or neither. Gender, sex, and attraction exist on a spectrum. The flying gender unicorn is a helpful and fun tool to visually represent this concept. So let's start with gender identity. Gender identity is how someone chooses to identify in respects to being a man or a woman. It's how you personally feel inside about what your gender is. Since gender identity is a spectrum, it is possible for people's genders to be between or other than man and woman. Now, gender expression is how a person chooses to express themselves through their actions and appearance in respect to gender. This spectrum includes typical masculine and typical feminine gender expression, as well as expressions in between. And it's important to note that gender identity and gender expression are two separate things, and they don't have to match. For example, I can be a person who dresses super femininely and identifies as a man. Sex is usually assigned at birth, at least in the biological sense, and sex here is used to describe the biological features of what we consider sex. So, that includes the genitalia, hormone levels, and chromosomes, as well as other characteristics that society associates with being assigned male at birth or being assigned female. Some people who don't fit into the biological male-female categories are intersex. Biological sex is often assigned at birth by a medical professional, so it doesn't necessarily line up exactly with someone's gender identity or expression. Attraction to other people also exists on a spectrum. People can be attracted to men, women, or other genders, or any combination of those, no matter what their own gender is. We'll go more into depth on that later. Right now, all that's important for you to know is that there are two parts of attraction. One is physical or sexual, and one is emotional or romantic. And there's an example of all of them being expressed at once. Okay, so romantic or emotional attraction is wanting to pursue a romantic or close emotional relationship with someone, i.e., I want to go on dates with them and hold their hand. Sexual or physical attraction is wanting to be in a sexual relationship with someone, i.e., I want to have sex with her. Romantic and sexual attraction are distinct and separate things. So, for those who feel both, sexual and romantic attraction can, but don't always match. For example, I can be romantically attracted to men and women, but only want to have sex with men. Some people don't experience both types of attraction, though. Some people don't experience romantic attraction, which is specifically called being aromantic. On the other hand, some people don't experience sexual attraction, which is called being asexual. It is possible to be both aromantic and asexual, but it's also possible to be asexual and experience romantic attraction, or aromantic and experience sexual attraction. For example, let's just say that I am not sexually attracted to anyone, but I want to be in a romantic relationship with people who are the same gender as me. Now, it's important to note that asexuality and aromanticism are natural parts of the human experience. It's not unnatural to not experience sexual or romantic attraction, and it doesn't make you broken or less than in any way. Sexuality, which I'm using here to mean sexual identity and who you're attracted to, is a spectrum, just like we talked about a few slides ago. The ones listed here are some examples, but they're not an exhaustive list by any means. Lesbians are female or feminine people who are attracted to female or feminine people. Gay is an umbrella term for people who are attracted to the same gender as them, and often is used as a term for people for men who are attracted to men. Straight or heterosexual people are attracted to a gender that isn't their own gender, specifically men who are attracted to women and women who are attracted to men. And these previous examples are all of people who are attracted to only one gender, but it is possible to be attracted to multiple genders. Bisexual means being attracted to more than one gender. Usually, bisexual people are attracted to people of their own gender and another gender. It's important to mention that bisexuality can be used in a way that seems to indicate that there are only two genders, as in attraction to men and women, by implying only that there are two genders, men and women. But the intention behind the use of the word bisexual is actually to imply that there is attraction to more than one gender, and that can be any gender or any combination of genders. That can be non-binary people. Not doesn't necessarily have to just be men and women specifically, although it can be. Although a bisexual person can be attracted to also, a bisexual person can be attracted to one gender more than another, and that is still bisexuality. A different word for people who are attracted to multiple genders is pansexual, and this is usually used for people who are attracted to more than two genders. We've already talked about asexuality, but that's being attracted to no genders at all. So now, speaking of genders, let's talk about them. Let's talk about different gender identities. Transgender is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity does not match their sex assigned at birth. It is often used to refer directly to trans men, people who are assigned female at birth and identify as men, and trans women who are assigned male at birth but identify as women. Transgender can also apply to people whose gender identity is more between male and female. A more specific word for this is non-binary. A non-binary person might experience their gender being between male and female, but closer than one to another, or completely separate from male and female. Non-binary people do sometimes use they/them pronouns. Not all of them do, but some do. Non-binary and trans folks, and all people, can use any pronouns that feel comfortable to them. If someone asks you to use particular pronouns, make a conscious effort to do so when talking to them and when referring to them, even when they're not there. If you're not sure what someone's pronouns are, you can ask them, but do so in a polite way. For example, hey, I just want to make sure I'm using the right pronouns for you. What pronouns would you like me to use? Asking about someone's pronouns helps you make them feel comfortable and respected, but remember that they don't owe you any explanation about their gender identity if they don't want to give you one. And further, it is not your responsibility as a non-binary or trans person to educate other people about your gender or experience. You should never have to justify your existence. If you're curious to know more about someone's gender identity, you can ask them politely. I'm confused about X thing about your gender, and I'd love it if you would explain more if you don't mind. But they don't have to explain if they don't want to. If you are curious about trans and non-binary identities, there are some links to further resources that go more in depth in the description below and in the Canvas page for this video, so please check them out if you're curious. Cisgender is the opposite of transgender. Cisgender is a term used to indicate people whose gender identities match their sex assigned at birth, i.e., a person assigned male at birth who identifies as a man. And there is the non-binary indication as well. Now, sex in a biological sense has several components, as we've discussed: sexual and reproductive organs, chromosomes, etc. Typically, when sex is assigned by medical professionals at birth, babies with penises are assigned male, and babies with vulvas or vaginas are assigned female. But some babies are born with genitalia that isn't clearly a penis or a vagina, and these people are intersex, though not always assigned so at birth. Intersex is a term used to indicate people who are born with biological sex characteristics that don't fit in the binary male, people with penises, or female, people with vaginas categories. Remember that gender identity, gender expression, and biological sex don't have to match. For example, I can be an intersex person with ambiguous genitalia who identifies as a woman and dresses and acts in a masculine way. Now, to round out the LGBTQ plus terminology, queer is a term that people often use to express a spectrum of identities and orientations that are counter to the mainstream. Queer is often used as a catch-all to include many people, including those who do not identify as exclusively straight and/or folks who have non-binary or gender-expansive identities. This term was previously used as a slur, but has been reclaimed by many parts of the LGBTQAI plus movement. Questioning is another Q term for folks in the LGBTQAI plus community who are exploring their gender identity or expression or sexual identity. Now, this presentation is meant to cover sex and sexuality, and that includes the act of sex, not just biological sex. So then, what is sex? Or rather, what counts as sex? There isn't just one correct definition. Sex can include vaginal penetration, anal penetration, oral stimulation, and genital stimulation. Sex can be anything that you and your partners feel like counted as sex. This can differ from person to person and situation to situation. For example, a lesbian might count oral sex as having sex, but a cisgender male couple, in which both members are cisgender and male, might not count oral sex as sex and instead count oral stimulation as foreplay and anal penetration as sex. It's up to you and your personal definition of what you feel like sex is in your situation and relationships. And this flowchart here, that you can pause and take a closer look at if you'd like, is a fun representation of this concept. Right. So, in a study done last winter as part of the National College Health Assessment, 29% of Cal Poly students reported having oral sex, 29% reported having vaginal sex, and 2% reported having anal sex in the past 2 weeks. The numbers were higher for people who had different types of sex in the past month. So, what I want you to take from this is that people are having sex on campus, and that's okay. But also, 37% of Cal Poly students, reported never having had oral sex, 42% reported never having had vaginal sex, and 86% reported never having had anal sex. So many people on this campus are not having sex at all, and that's okay too. It's okay to have sex or not have sex, but if you do have sex, it's important to remember to use protection and make sure that it's consensual before going at it. All right, so avoiding discussing sexual pleasure runs the risk of people seeking ineffective and incorrect resources. So we're going to talk about pleasure is a key driver of sexual behavior. Sexual pleasure can be roughly defined as the physical and or psychological satisfaction and enjoyment derived from solitary or shared erotic experiences. Encouraging self-pleasuring helps normalize exploring sexual feelings in a safe way. Consent is another important thing we need to talk about when we talk about sex. Consent is an agreement between participants to engage in a sexual activity. Consent should be clearly and freely communicated. A verbal and affirmative expression of consent can help both you and your partner to understand and respect each other's boundaries. Consent cannot be given by individuals who are underage, incapacitated by drugs or alcohol, or asleep or unconscious. If someone agrees to an activity under pressure or intimidation or threat, that isn't considered consent because it was not given freely. Unequal power dynamics, such as engaging in sexual activity with an employee or a student, also mean that consent cannot be freely given. And we'll go more into depth about consent in a different presentation, but I just wanted to give you some basics. All right. So, if you're interested in learning more, here are some further resources that you can use to learn more about sex and sexuality. Please feel empowered to pause this video and take a screenshot for later. The links on the screen, as well as more resources, are linked in the description of this video and are linked in the Canvas module as well. Please scan this QR code and let us know how we did. We appreciate any and all feedback, and it'll just take a minute or two, we promise. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this. Now go take care of yourself, take a break, get some water if you need it, and I sincerely hope you have a good day.